Hello students, welcome back to another video or another class. Today in this video, we'll be learning about what is learning. So basically in this video, we'll be talking about some definition. What is the definition of some definition of learning, nature of learning, what are the types of learning, and we'll summarize in a table. So let's move forward to the class. Okay, so at first, the definition of learning. Learning is the process through which individuals acquire or modify their knowledge, skills, behaviors, attitude, or values based on experiences, practice, study, or observation. It leads to relatively permanent changes in behavior or understanding, allowing individuals to adapt to their environment more effectively. There are two definitions I have added in the PPT or in the slide. These were given by some renowned scholar. First definition is basically learning refers to the process by which an activity originates or is changed through reacting to an encounter situation, provided that the characteristics of the change cannot be explained by native response tendencies, maturation, or temporary state of the organism. Another definition was given by Kimball in 1961. The definition is learning is a relatively permanent change in behavioral potentiality that occurs as a result of reinforced practices. Let's move forward. Now we'll be learning about the nature of learning. What is the nature of learning? Learning is basically a continuous process. When you talk about continuous process, it happens from birth and continues throughout life. Learning does not stop after formal education. Experiences constantly modify our behavior. Second point is active process. Learning is basically, it demands active engagement involving attention, memory, motivation, and practice. Next point is purposeful. Learning is basically is a purposeful. Individuals learn to fulfill their needs or achieve specific goals. Next point is relatively permanent change. When we learn something, true learning leads to lasting changes. It makes changes in our behavior. Next point is results of experiences. So it basically says learning is based on interaction with the environment, direct or vice versa. Next point is adaptation. Learning basically helps an individual to adjust to any situation, any changes in the environment. Apart from that, learning also involves changes that brings changes in our behavior through process or feelings. However, not all changes are considered learning. Suppose changes due to fatigue or drugs are excluded. Also, learning is universal. Every living being with a nervous system learns from human to animal. Also, learning can be positive or negative. Learning may lead to desirable behavior, for example, gaining knowledge, or undesirable behavior, that is learning bad habits. Learning is also measurable. Learning, how can we be measure or measurable learning? It can be assessed by testing behavioral changes or cognitive understanding. Let's move forward and see some types of learning. Basically, there are some types or theories of learning. The first one is classical conditioning. It was developed by Ivan Pavlov. What he says learning occurs, or the theory of learning by Ivan Pavlov, it says learning occurs when a neutral stimulus becomes associated with a meaningful stimulus and acquires the capacity to elicit a similar response. if you know the theory of Ivan Pavlov learning, he used in the experiment, one dog was there. So what the dog learned to salivate at the sound of a bell because the bell has been associated with food. Next one is operant conditioning, which was developed by B.F. Skinner. According to this theory or this type, learning happens through reinforcement or reward and punishment. Reinforcement is basically reward and punishment. Behavior is strengthened if followed by a reward and weakened if followed by punishment. One example can be a student studies harder after receiving praises for good grades or good marks. Next one is observational learning, which was given by Albert Bandura. In this model, in this theory, learning occurs by watching or imitating others' behavior. That we can say modeling also, that we can relate with modeling also. One example can be a child learns to say thank you after seeing adults use it frequently. Next one is cognitive learning. It involves understanding, insight, memory, and problem solving rather than mere trial and error. Individuals use thinking to make sense of their experiences. One example can be learning to solve mathematical problems by understanding the logic behind formulas rather than memorizing them. Next one is latent learning. Latent learning is basically learning that occurs without immediate visible change in the behavior. It becomes apparent only when there is a motivation to demonstrate it. One example can be a student learns a shortcut to school but uses it only when usual route is blocked. Another one is habituation. Habituation and sensitization. Habituation is basically a simple form of learning where there is a decrease in response to a repeated being stimulus. An example can be a person stops noticing the ticking of a clock after being exposed to it for some time. And sensitization is basically an increase in behavioral response after repeated exposure to a stimulus. One example can be becoming increasingly irritated by a dripping faucet. Now we will be summarize the entire whatever we have did in this lecture in with the help of this table. So basically we have learned the definition of learning. After that we have learned some types of learning. The first type is classical conditioning. Classical conditioning is basically learning through association. One example I have given already, dog salivating at the sound of a bell. Second type of learning is operant conditioning, which is learning through reward and punishment. The example I gave is studying hard after getting praise for good marks. Observational learning is basically learning by watching others. Like one example is children mimicking parents' behavior. Cognitive learning, basically learning by understanding and insight, like solving problems using logic. Latent learning, basically hidden learning that shows when needed. Knowing a shortcut without using it. That student, he was using the shortcut when the usual road was blocked. Habituation basically decreased response to repeated stimulus. Example can be ignoring that clock ticking. Sensitization is basically increased responses to repeated stimulus. Example can be getting annoyed by dripping faucet. Thank you so much. If you have any doubt, any question, you can drop down in the comments. I will try to explain. I will try to reply back your responses. Thank you so much once again. In another video, we will be learning about one by one the theories of learning, like classical conditioning, operant conditioning, trial and error, and other Tolman sign learning theory and all. Okay, thank you so much for today.